In 2013, the National Economic Council reached an agreement to unify the right-of-way charge across the country to 145 naira per linear meter of fiber. However, governments across the country, the state governments, failed to comply with the regulation. Earlier this year, about 14 states, including Lagos, hiked their right-of-way charges on telecom infrastructure. But the Ekiti state government has taken the initiative of becoming the first state in the country to comply with the National Economic Council's approved charges for broadband. Now, I'm now joined by Akin Oyebode, the special advisor to the Ekiti state governor on investment, trade and innovations, and he'll be speaking on that development in the state. Good morning to you, Akin. Welcome to the Global Business Report on the Rise News. So, Ekiti State, first states to comply with the government's right-of-way suggestion on the 145 naira per meter. Can you take us through when you began working on reducing that charge?
So it started last year as part of our broader ease of doing business reforms. The governor set up a doing business reforms committee that looked at several issues to improve the business environment in Ekiti. One of the critical issues we looked at was deepening broadband penetration. Ekiti State has the lowest broadband penetration of all the southwest states. And our view was that to deepen broadband penetration, we needed to make it easier and cheaper for infrastructure providers to lay fiber in Ekiti. So we adopted the National Economic Council's recommendation to reduce right-of-way charges to 145 naira per meter. So this is the culmination of, I'd say, a few months of work, consulting various stakeholders and allowing people understand that by foregoing the immediate revenue we'll earn from that charge, we can lay the foundation for the longer-term prosperity of the state and its people.
Fantastic. Now, what are the benefits that Ekiti hopes to reap from this decision?
I mean, the primary focus is, of course, to deepen broadband penetration across the state. Now, this helps us do a bunch of things better. First, it allows us to deploy safe city infrastructure that seeks to improve the security of the state. Now, with fiber optic cables across the state and broadband across the state, it means we can then start to monitor activities around the state, which reduces incidents of kidnapping and insecurity you see in the states, every now and again. Secondly, it helps us improve the delivery of things like education. I mean, if you look at what COVID-19 has brought upon us, you find that there's a widening inequality between children that have access to broadband, who can continue some form of education, and the kids in the suburban and rural areas who sadly do not have access to broadband and are limited to radio and television delivery of education materials. Even things like healthcare, you can then deepen how you serve the communities. Agriculture, for example, broadband can be used to provide information to farmers on pricing, on weather, and on all sorts of extension services. So the benefits are far-reaching and wide. But most importantly, this aligns with our Ekiti Knowledge Zone, which is 1,600 hectares, planned to be Nigeria's first service and innovation-based special economic zone.
Thank you for that, Aki. Okay, so I want to ask, are you worried about a monopoly? And how would you combat that while walking the fine line between a monopoly and first mover advantage for whichever company is first to take advantage of this?
I mean, I think first mover advantage is, look, it's an incentive for whoever comes first, right? So part of what we are going to consider is obviously things like a one dig policy, where effectively you don't have companies digging into the ground because they want to lay cables. And so potentially one of the things that we are considering is potentially saying, if you move first, we will allow you create multiple ducts, and then you can charge a small rental fee for anyone who's now just plugging their fiber into your duct. Again, that's the benefit of coming first. But right now, we are currently engaging with a few of the telecoms companies, and there are a few options available to us. Of course, one option is for the state to provide the infrastructure and then charge a small rental fee to everybody. In that case, the state controls the infrastructure. It's not in the hands of a third party or a private company, and no one can be accused of having a monopolistic advantage over other companies. So there are various options available to us, but it's important to say that the decision to reduce the right-of-way charges is what's opening up these options today. It's what's allowing infrastructure providers now to say, hey, Ekiti is serious about doing business. We're serious about deepening broadband penetration. And it's also useful because we've got quite a number of tertiary institutions whose students will benefit from this.
Fantastic. Now, you just mentioned that Ekiti State this indicates that Ekiti is serious about doing business. It's been said that with you leading the way, other states can possibly follow suit. But I do want to ask you, and maybe this is a trick question or not, but would you prefer to have other states follow suit or have them keep their charges high so that all the business comes into Ekiti State from this decision?
I think ultimately we have to recognize that we're subnational operating within the context of Nigeria, within the context of a federation. So I believe that the rising tide lifts all boats. I believe that all states will benefit from a much larger pie. So the overall objective here is to increase economic productivity in Nigeria. So it only benefits us if other states follow suit. Because what then starts to happen, remember, even if you are laying fiber through from Lagos to Ekiti, you probably have to pass through you pass through Lagos, Ogun, Osun before you get to us. So having a lower right-of-way charges across all those states actually reduces the overall cost to Ekiti State. If you are coming from Abuja, you have to pass through Kogi to get to us. So we don't operate in an island. We operate within the context of a federation. So I would be excited if more states follow suit, I'd say.
Fantastic. You also mentioned a one dig policy. Can you describe what I've heard of the term parallel digging? What is that, and what's your stance? What's the state's stance on that? Are you still with me? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So the view is not to upset the road infrastructure in the states. And one of the things that we are also working on is even incorporating this infrastructure in the design of roads so that you have effectively one pipe going to the ground and then everyone can just plug their cables into that. It also helps you troubleshoot where you have challenges because you can just easily open up that single space, fix whatever the problem is, and shut it up again. So it reduces intrusion, traffic, because restatement is a big problem. Everyone is digging and covering it up. And so that's what you try to move away from. And we've learned from states who have tried both policies, and we've seen that this is a much better approach.
All right. Now, I want to talk to you about the federal government's national broadband plan. This one, I think there's a second go around now. Now this one's from 2020 through 2024, 2025. Should that be driven at the state level? What's your take on the plan?
I think the federal government creates the overall structure, but has to do that in partnership with states. And I think for the first and second policies, both the former minister, Mrs. Mobola Johnson, and the current minister, Dr. Esa Pantami, have worked with the Governors Forum to articulate that policy and to share that with the subnational stakeholders. I think it's now up to us as states to now support that policy and start to create subnational policies that align with the policy at the federation. So ultimately, I feel that this is a great opportunity for Nigeria to deepen first broadband penetration across the country, but also digital skills learning all over the country. We've got arguably tens of millions of people who will be put in jobs if they have the right skills. So it's time for us to start to rival places like Vietnam, like India, and Philippines, who are today the major hubs for things like business process outsourcing, customer service, etc. I think we have some unique benefits, and by improving, national and subnational collaboration, we can start to see the results of this very quickly.
All right, great stuff. Okay, I think we've got about a minute left. Aki, I want to ask you, the recession has been projected for Nigeria, IMF, and everywhere else. Less than a minute. How do you plan to navigate your way through that for the rest of the year? Briefly, if you can.
I mean, I think it's obviously one, improving the business environment so that we allow businesses thrive. And it's also providing some social investment programs to our poor and vulnerable people. It's going to be a difficult spell, so we've got to cut down the cost of governance as well. And I think those are the three main anchors. Just recalibrating and making sure we take the most advantage of what will now become the growth after the storm. But working through this storm is effectively reducing the cost of governance, ensuring that we allow our businesses operate within this difficult period, and that we support our poorest and most vulnerable people. Thank you.
All right. Akin Oyebode, Special Advisor to the Ekiti State Governor on Trade, Investment and Innovation. Thank you so much for your time, sir. We appreciate you.